I'd like to get a top line look at the issues that each of you are most closely following in your reporting. So, Ben, let's stick with you. And can you let me know what issues you're following closely?
My beat's Congress. So I've been following what's been happening there, which for the next few months probably won't be a whole lot given the election year coming up. But some of the things that we're watching in terms of movement on is the pharmacy benefit reform management or pharmacy benefit PBM reform package, and that's been moving through the House and Senate, seeing where that goes, and then also telehealth in terms of whether these Medicare waivers, commercial market waivers will be made permanent or be temporarily extended again. And then, since Congress isn't doing a whole lot right now, also following the Biden administration, sort of racing to finalize a bunch of healthcare rules before the Congressional Review Act deadline to finalize them, which would basically make it a lot easier for Congress to overturn them if they don't get it done in the next month or so. And then also following what the Trump campaign is planning to do and a potential second Trump administration is planning to do on healthcare.
John, what are the issues you're following?
I guess I'm following the tensions between the US and China a bit too. There's a bill called the Biosecure Act that would all but ban a lot of China-based companies from doing business in the United States. There's you never know how Congress is going to pass something, whether it's going to attach it to something else, but there's a pretty decent chance that at the end of the year, when Congress deals with the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, that there will at least be an effort, I think, to attach the Biosecure Act to that legislation.
And Jonah, what's top of mind for you at Pharma Forum?
I've been going pretty deep on the Inflation Reduction Act. If you go to a pharma conference, that's what people are talking about from a politics perspective. It passed last year, but it's just now parts of it are phasing in. And the big part, the Medicare negotiation part, is kind of, we're about to have a big moment when that first negotiated prices get revealed in September. Right after it passed, there were a bunch of lawsuits, so we've been following those. It looks like none of them are really going anywhere.
So overall, what do you think are the biggest issues that are going to drive voters to the polls in November or make undecided voters change their minds?
The biggest healthcare related issue, of course, is going to be around abortion and reproductive health. I think in terms of motivating voters, and certainly that's something that the Democratic Party is betting on, and we've seen in past elections has been a motivator. The extent to which it is I think up for debate a little bit.
I really do think that that abortion is the big one that's going to get people to go to the polls, but you will see other issues come up, usually through the lens of a fight.
There are a couple issues on both sides that'll, gin up the base. For Democrats, it's issues like abortion, healthcare costs, democracy broadly. Republicans, it's issues like the economy, the border, crime, immigration, things like that. And then it'll come down to whether, how the people, the smaller and smaller group in the middle, what they think on those issues. And, a lot of it comes down to pocketbook type issues.
Pricing is the big one, and I also am not sure how much it's actually going to move the needle. But I think it's worth pointing out that it's a weird issue politically because everyone's on the same side, and no one ever lost political points by saying that drug prices are too high and big pharma is charging too much. So you hear it from both sides. Now, the real differentiator is, are they actually getting anything done? I think Biden has a lot more to brag about than Trump does.
Trump has not honed his message on healthcare. He's definitely a little bit preoccupied right now, and I don't know that he's going to hone that message anytime soon. Also, it's just in his nature to completely flip-flop on everything. I mean that he was very much in support of Medicare drug price negotiation at the beginning of his administration and was dead set against it by the end. Biden, during his last State of the Union, it was pretty light on healthcare. He has said he wants to negotiate more drug prices, so he wants to expand Medicare drug price negotiation. So if he were to win and Democrats were to, retain enough control of Congress that they could do that, I mean, I guess that could be something that they would fight for. That would be a very difficult thing to pull off. I think they would need to have full control, and even when they have had full control, they had to water down Medicare drug price negotiations. So I think that would be a very heavy lift.
The bigger picture is the divided government in some way is likely, whether that means, White House, Congress, probably see, some form of divided government. So it probably means, a focus on issues that with bipartisan appeal, because you have to be able to get them through. So, probably more of the same in terms of what we've been seeing in this Congress. It's really hard to get legislating done before the election, and I assume we'll see a lot of action post-November. There a lot will try to be tacked on to the end of your spending package in terms of PBM reform, telehealth, plenty of other things. So I think that's sort of where all the legislating is going to happen.
After the election, when, before people have actually, left Congress, that lame duck period, that often offers an opportunity to work on a lot of these things. But a lot depends on who wins and who loses and what the dynamics are. And that's just really difficult to figure out right now. But so, yeah, PBM reform is possible. Medicare physician payment reform is possible. Site neutral, drug shortages. Those are all things that are pretty bipartisan to some extent. So they could either be worked on during lame duck or during a divided Congress next year.
What can we expect from Congress as we race against the shutdown deadline?
There's only so many times industry can freak out about a shutdown and then it doesn't happen before it starts to feel like going through the motions. There certainly are things in healthcare that would be quite affected if there were an actual shutdown. I know for pharma, a lot of the worry is about the FDA and clearances of things slowing to a crawl at a time when they really need them to happen.
I think for healthcare, September 1st isn't really the date to watch. I think December 31st is, and that's because when they did pass the last spending bill, they synced all the healthcare stuff to the expiration of telehealth flexibilities. So during the pandemic, the government, Congress, allowed doctors to use telehealth more easily. Patients really love it. Doctors really love it. They're going to renew it. This is something that people want.
What are PBMs doing that makes Congress want to legislate about PBMs?
PBMs have always been a popular, and I say this in a neutral way, but a popular punching bag for drug prices. Because if you're pharma and all of the fingers are pointed at you, saying that it's your greed and you're raising the prices. Attacking PBMs is a really easy way to sort of say, look, there's these other people and they're not even making drugs and they're, extracting a lot of money from the system. I think it's very easy to attack PBMs. A lot of stakeholders do it, but there is a reason that we haven't just gotten rid of them yet, because they do play an important role in how the very convoluted US drug market works, and they're pretty entrenched.
It seems like every year Congress has to intervene to change the way Medicare pays physicians because the payments are apparently too low. John, can you tell us a little bit about why that is and what's going on now?
The current system is still much better off for doctors than the old system was. Back when they replaced the sustainable growth rate, which was how they determined physician pay and Medicare until 2015. Let's just think of this in terms of a pie. The pie was shrinking. The pie is no longer shrinking. But doctors are mad that it's not growing enough. This year, they got a little bit of a bonus. It was a smaller bonus than they got last year. And so they consider that a cut. And they're not happy with it.
Well, thank you both. And then let's go to Jonah, but shift our attention to technology. And there's some aspects that have attracted Congress's attention, such as artificial intelligence, telehealth, and some others.
There's also a lot of conversation right now about synthetic data and synthetic controls, whether we can use big data and algorithms and historical data in certain cases in place of a placebo. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. and that isn't strictly an AI issue, but AI is kind of what's making it possible to do it at the level that people are starting to do it. What we don't see a lot yet in Gen AI is like patient-facing applications, right? Where like ChatGPT is actually, somebody's going to it as for triage or as a doctor. I mean, that's the stuff that I think if people start really seriously exploring it, is going to need to be more heavily regulated. But obviously people are cautious around that as they should be, given the limitations of these models right now.
It's going to come up in a lot of different ways, and the government is just now trying to get its hands around it.
Ben, you mentioned telehealth extensions a couple of times. Is there any chance that Congress will make those telehealth flexibilities permanent, or are we going to see another sort of temporary extension when we get to revisit this again in 2025?
Expanded telehealth is one of the most popular issues in healthcare in Congress right now. So there's no doubt that there will be at least a temporary extension, I think, at this point. There are still lawmakers that are concerned about data, whether there's enough data on outcomes to, sort of prove the concept permanently. And, there are concerns about costs, how that'll get paid for. But, but as John was saying, there could be some budget gimmicks to, pay for that. It depends on how much it costs and what the CBO scores it at. There are also a couple other open questions about, payment parity for in-person versus virtual care, the payment rates between those two and any differences there. And then some lawmakers are a little concerned about pushing people too much into virtual care and want to make sure the incentive is still there for in-person care. And that sort of plays in with the reimbursement rate issue as well. So I think we'll see some sort of extension, whether that's permanent or not. A lot of that's going to hinge on the cost and what sort of data comes out in the next months.
John, you mentioned you've been writing about international issues and China in particular. I was hoping that you could tell our audience what kinds of issues our audience should be paying attention to as far as it goes to China or other international healthcare issues.
I guess I would watch for whether this becomes a race with China over biotechnology, or if it remains narrowly focused on protecting Americans' genetic information from falling into the hands of the Chinese military or Chinese Communist Party. I don't think that has been settled yet.
Turning to the Medicare drug price negotiation program, I know you've been following that. Can you give our audience a little bit of an overview of the timing of that and the next steps and what you plan to see and what difference you think that makes?
What's happening now is the 10 drugs have been selected. Negotiation is underway. We don't know anything about what's happening in negotiation. It's behind closed doors. We won't know those negotiated prices until September 1st. What makes this really contentious in pharma is that pharma does not believe this is a negotiation, because the way that the act is structured, HHS, or not HHS, CMS kind of has all the power. They set a price and pharma has to take it or leave it. And if they leave it, they either have to pay a huge excise tax, like a really mind-bogglingly huge excise tax, or they have to stop doing any business with Medicare at all altogether. They have to figure out how they're going to live with it, which might mean raising prices on other things to make up for the money that they're losing through this. I mean, the act is structured so that the drugs that are being picked out are kind of their cash cows. So they subsidize other R&D. And that's why pharma, I think that's their public line on why this is bad, is like, this is going to make us do less innovating. We're going to make less innovative drugs because we're not going to have the money to support R&D because that's what we use this extra money for. But how much that's just a line is, I won't comment, but I think you can draw some connections there. I think we're going to find out a lot on September 1st when we see what these negotiated prices actually are. Pharma's fear is that because CMS can negotiate at gunpoint, the prices are going to be really, really low. But we don't know that. They have a lot of rules about how they set them. They're supposed to base them on factors like what they cost to make. So that's, I think, what everybody's waiting to actually see, the first set of negotiated prices. That will really tell us what the real effect of this law is or isn't.
The day that they release the prices on September 1st, that will be telling. If we're still paying more than other countries pay, then we're still paying more than other countries pay. Or if anybody can kind of like figure out what the net price is, and if we're still paying more than the net price, that will show you that that Medicare is not really going that hard on this, which is either good or bad. Whether that's good or bad depends on where you sit, but it will at least be very telling.